Howdy, boys and girls. This is an odd thing to say. Welcome to the 6th season of the Carla and Crappy Show. It's a huge number, Carla.
Why? And we're still here. I went back. I watched like a snippet of our very first show.
Oh God, really?
Yeah, and I was like, wow, we've come a long way since.
I can't imagine. No, I can't. I can go back and watch some stuff. I watched some stuff from last season. But watching the first time we ever did this, I'm not sure that I could manage that.
And the fact that we accidentally named the show on our first show.
Is that how that happened?
Is how that happened. We neither of us had any idea what to call the show, and you're like, well, we should just call it the Carla and Crappy Show. And I was like, okay, that works.
Well, that does work. It does work.
And 6 years later, cheers.
I'm not sure I could come up with anything better. Cheers. To start with, I'm Uncle Crappy. I live in Pittsburgh. I am, if you read the show description, I am the demented college football fan of this pair. Carla, please introduce yourself to the teeming thousands of people who have not seen us yet.
Okay, so I'm Carla. I'm Carla Swank Fox now, because in the past 6 years I've managed to get married in that whole stretch. So
yes,
and I am in Nashville, Tennessee now. I have been here I'm working on year 7, believe it or not. No, I'm working on year 8. I'm working on year 8 in Nashville, which is crazy. I've almost lived in Nashville as long as I've lived in Pittsburgh, which is just a very sobering thought.
Right.
Because Crappy and I were coworkers for a while, and that's how we met. And we both have this strange affinity for college football that sometimes verges on the edge of obsessive. And so we just decided that we should start talking about college football.
The part that Carla left out there is that she is the reformed sports writer of the pair. So you will notice those tendencies. Me as the fan, Carla is the one who knows what she's talking about. That part does not change from the shows that we've done in the past. There are some things that are different this year. We would like to say thank you and a brief lamentation of the late great draft day suit. Sarah and Lori and Kim did such a cool thing by offering us a home for the first few years we did the show. In the place of draft day suit, our main presence is going to be on Facebook, and you guys you could be watching the video on our Facebook page as we speak. Obviously, we do this through YouTube and Google Hangouts, and you can find us there also. But we're going to do something different this year that we kind of talked about, and I got super lazy when we got started last season and did not look into this. And as it turns out, it's actually pretty easy to do. We're going to have the audio portion of our show posted as a podcast. We're going to be hosted on Libsyn. I will post the URL here. Let's just go ahead and assume we're going to put it right there. We are also pending approvals from iTunes and TuneIn, so you'll be able to find us other places. Carla, what do you think about that? It's an odd thing. It's
a very odd thing. We've been talking about this for a while now about should we make this an audio podcast? Because I mean, obviously we both work in media and know how easy it is to listen to podcasts as you're driving or running or anything. That you're able to multitask in that way. It's slightly terrifying because, like as I said during text yesterday, it's all fun and games until people can find you on iTunes.
It's absolutely. I think there's going to be T-shirts that say that at some point. I think that has to happen.
Hashtag CNC show. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's going to be a necessary. So, but anyway, I will when we get the approvals from iTunes, TuneIn. If there's someplace else you guys want us to be, let me know and I'll look into it. This is all kind of a new thing, so we'll see how it goes. But so yeah, that's going to be a cool thing. I'm looking forward. I included TuneIn so I could listen to our show on my Amazon Alexa, so Alexa could play my show for me in my own living room. I thought that would be kind of a cool thing. So
hey, my Alexa can play it then too, because
so we'll see how that goes. So
sorry if anybody's echoes go off.
So with that stuff aside, what it basically comes down to is that there's a college football season. I was actually this sort of snuck up on me, and late last week. I mean, you had actually been talking about, okay, we're going to do a show and do the stuff, and And then late last week, somebody posted a link to Ohio State's marching band doing a dress rehearsal in the stadium as a 360-degree video that they posted at the bottom of the ramp where the band comes down into the stadium. And I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, it's almost college football season. And suddenly I'm ready. And I'm especially ready for Big Ten season.
Well, and it's actually already college football season because now we have this like super weird, like soft launch week 0 thing happening in college football now. Technically, we had a game. We're recording this on Sunday. We had a game last night. Several games yesterday, actually, but Stanford Rice last night, which was like a real legitimate college football game. We actually already kind of had our first upset with the Colorado State just like wailing on Oregon State yesterday.
Oregon State, yes, that was a beating, and I watched I just bits and pieces of a whole bunch of college football yesterday, and it's like, wow, okay, I'm ready, and I'm especially ready for Big Ten season. And again, for those of you guys who don't know, I'm the demented Ohio State fan. Carla, we don't have any actually official affiliations with these.
That's true.
Carla's the Penn State fan, and we're actually both kind of stoked about what could happen this season because it's easy to make arguments. And in fact, I think we're going to go ahead and do this about why our respective teams could win the Big Ten or to have an otherwise special season. We're not going to spend a lot of time on our games this weekend because Penn State hosts Akron and Ohio State goes to Indiana. And I think we have a pretty solid handle on how those games are going to go. But Carla, why should Penn State be considered a possibility for the Big Ten championship?
So experience. You can boil it down into one word. You had a team last year that nobody expected to be there that suddenly found itself there, and returning a bunch of starters on both sides of the ball. Especially on the offensive side. I mean, I can't wait. Even though yes, it's an opener against Akron, and it's like whatever. But at the same time, it's one of those things you can't wait to watch Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley again. Like
I can wait.
Yeah, that's true. You could wait, but I can't. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this offense looks like this year. And the nice thing heading into this season that Penn State didn't have last year is this offensive line has actually already gelled. And that was a huge question mark entering the season last year and caused the stumbling blocks. All you have to do is go back and watch the Pitt tape from last year to realize that it took several games for that line to gel. Yeah. We don't have to wait for that this year if you're watching Penn State. So I think that offense is going to pick up right where it left off. There are some holes to fill on defense, but because of the way that the injury bug kind of bit that defense off and on during the season last year, most everybody they've got plugging into holes saw game action. They might not have seen a lot of game action, but they saw some game action, which means that you've got a really well-experienced team. Why do I think Penn State can win the Big Ten? Schedule, in addition to the experience, because, okay, their road games, 3 of their 5 road games are at Iowa, at Northwestern, at Maryland. Mm-hmm. That's pretty forgiving.
Yeah.
There's no.
Iowa's always an iffy one, and that's regardless of how good the Hawkeyes are. That's for whatever reason. That's always a game that's like. Eek.
Yeah, it's same thing. Like when we'll talk about this, at Indiana is always one of those like. Eek. Although not this year, I don't think. I think you're good this year now. Now that
not since Kevin Wilson showed up in Columbus now.
Yeah. Now you have the good. Now you have Kevin Wilson on your sideline.
I'll talk about that in a second.
We'll talk about that. But okay, so those are the 3 road games. The 2 things that and they get Michigan and Pitt at home in Beaver Stadium, which I think are big things. The biggest game that Penn State has this year is a game that we're going to talk a whole heck of a lot about when it comes up, and that's at the Horseshoe on October 28th. And to be really perfectly honest with you, that's the real big challenge in that schedule. The only other game that I would make a little bit nervous about is the week immediately following, which is November 4th at Michigan State. I know that Michigan State is not necessarily at the caliber of where it was a couple of years ago.
Right.
But you've got a Mark D'Antonio coach team coming off of a team that will have been super hyped regardless of how that game turns out at the Horseshoe, going on the road again into a really tough environment. Those 2 games in back-to-back weeks really kind of make me nervous. If all of those things, however, come into play, and hey, I'm not ruling out winning in the Horseshoe because this team beat your Buckeyes last year, so why not? Yep. You got to believe. And Penn State doesn't have an Oklahoma on the schedule.
Sure.
So there's an advantage there in that regard. But yeah, that's how I think it could potentially line up. That the the Nittany Lions could find themselves in the Big Ten championship 2 years in a row.
Okay. I think it's fun to look now. I've talked. I know if you go back and look at shows, I've talked about complained about the fact that Michigan's been down, and Penn State, obviously with the loss of scholarships, has struggled for a few years, and that hurts. It hurts my team, obviously, but it hurts the entire conference.
Yeah.
So it's fun now to take a look and see, particularly the Big Ten East, and that I think is the class of the conference, and there are folks in Ann Arbor who could probably make the same arguments that you and I are making now, although I don't believe a word of them. But
I don't either this year.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that later. Also, the thing that's and then I'm going to start kind of the same way that you did in the Big Ten preview meetings in Chicago at the end of July. Urban started his remarks by saying last year we were the most inexperienced team in college football. This year we are not. And I'm like, oh, okay, I like this. And there is some inexperience there, but his point was there should be offensive line improvement. Ohio State has the best and deepest defensive line in the country, probably. You look at the secondary where we lost guys to draft picks, but that hasn't been a huge concern. There's an experience, sure, but there's just ridiculous talent. So what happens with I will throw out a couple ifs. And I will say off the bat that I'm reasonably confident that these things are going to happen. We mentioned that Kevin Wilson departed as head coach in Indiana, has been hired as Ohio State's offensive coordinator, and I'm happy about that for a lot of reasons, but mostly because I don't have to watch my team struggle to beat Indiana and Kevin Wilson's offense. I can watch Kevin Wilson's offense, hopefully crush everyone, and I actually think that's a possibility. If there are two things, improved offensive line play, and that should happen. That was a big issue last year when pass protection was a little rough. Then there's no downfield passing game. Then teams can stack the box. Then Ohio State can't run the ball, and then we're losing to Clemson 31-0, and it's frustrating to watch. So that's one component. The other component is if Ohio State has wideouts to catch the ball. I would urge you guys, if you have a copy, I left mine downstairs, of the National Athlon Preview. There's a story in there about Kevin Wilson's offense and how it's going to apply at Ohio State. And I have nightmares about this still, but it is based on deep balls outside the hash marks, and clearing out the center of the field for the running game. So if there are guys who can run long and catch footballs, and Urban seems to be reasonably certain that we have those. With those two things, Ohio State's offense is going to be freaking scary. It's going to be spectacular. With JT Barrett's been in Columbus for 13 or 14 years at this point.
Feels like it. Yeah,
it does. And I think the defense is going to be as good as it generally is, and the offense could be something really, really special. Schedule's pretty good. Ohio State has to travel to Iowa, and we play Ann Arbor at the end of the season. But as you said, Penn State's in Columbus, Michigan State's in Columbus.
Oklahoma's in Columbus.
Oklahoma's in Columbus. That's week 2. And we'll see. I mean, I always wonder about how long you wait to figure out how good your team is. And I think that we're going to find out about Ohio State in week 2. So we'll see how that goes. But with a typically steady offense and a typically steady defense and a potentially spectacular offense, I think this could be a lot of fun. This could be a fun season for me and my fellow Ohio State fans. And that sort of leads us to the next thing. obviously we've got a Final Four system that seems to be working pretty well, unless my team has to play Clemson in this national semifinal,
or your Penn State get left out.
Well, yeah, there's that too. But once you get to the Final Four, it does seem to be working pretty well. Carla, who is your Final Four as you look at the start of the season? Who do you see?
Who do I see? So go back and look at the Final Four that were named at the end of December last year. And I hate to say it, it doesn't look a whole lot different than where we ended last year, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
If you go back and watch the season premiere of last year, I said this probably verbatim, that I'm going to keep picking Alabama to make the Final Four until Alabama gives me a reason not to.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
And there's no reason not to again this year. So because for the first time in a long time, they've got a returning quarterback. So add that to the mix. And okay, so I got Alabama out of the SEC. I like Washington out of the Pac-12 again this year.
Okay.
It does look like they're still kind of the class of that conference now. Close second is USC, but I have some concerns about their defense. Their offense is going to be unbelievable, but USC always seems, I can't talk yet, always seems to have trouble on the defensive side of the ball. It looks like this year might not be any different. So I like Washington. The Big Ten champ gets in. So I think that's either Ohio State or Penn State gets in.
Okay, that's
and I will give you the benefit of the doubt at this point. I'm going to say, because the game is in the horseshoe, for the benefit of the doubt at the moment, I'm going to give Ohio State and they're ranked higher at this point. So if you're going into this part of the making a prognostication, you've got to go Ohio State, even though my heart is with Penn State. But we'll get back to that.
Sure.
So that's three teams that don't look a whole lot different from last year: Alabama, Ohio State, Washington. Which means that there are a couple different scenarios here. The ACC, a fourth team could come from the ACC again. The ACC baffles me a bit this year. Florida, and we'll talk about Florida State here in a little bit, but Florida State right now, Athlon has them ranked. Where does Athlon have them ranked? Athlon has them ranked at number 3. Sports Illustrated has them ranked at number 2, and both of those to me feel high.
Okay.
I can't really put my finger on why exactly, other than the fact that it felt like they didn't really ever gel on offense last year at all. Defense was good, but the offense was kind of all over the place. Maybe that's going to be fixed. You still have Clemson in the mix in the ACC, because yes, I know they lost Deshaun Watson, but at the same time, you never doubt a Dabo Swinney coached team. Because he's known to pull rabbits out of hats in more than one occasion, right? So Clemson is still in the mix, and you gotta keep your glance out on Louisville too, because Lamar Jackson's back, and that offense was ridiculous. If Louisville can figure out defense this year, they could be in the mix. So the ACC is kind of a jumbled mess, and the Big 12 is going to eat itself alive. It's going to be a great conference. There's a lot of really good teams in the Big 12 this year, but I don't think there's a great team that can make a strong enough of a case to make it into the college football playoff. Oklahoma lost Bob Stoops. Texas has Tom Herman, awesome, but it's going to take a couple years before he gets his players.
You would think, yes.
There. Oklahoma State, some magazines preseasons had them ranked pretty high. But that's a tough ask. Will Oklahoma State actually be able to beat Oklahoma and Texas in the same year? They're kind of all over the place. TCU has Kenny Hill back at quarterback, but is that a good thing? Kansas State, I love Kansas State. Kansas State is a sleeper in this league. I can't wait. They're coming to Nashville in a couple weeks. They're playing Vandy on September 16th, and I think we're going to go to that game because Bill Snyder, Kansas State could just jump into this and be like the spark that kind of blows the whole thing up.
Right.
And then you got West Virginia kind of hanging out there. They could kind of, the parity. Remember, a couple years ago, we were talking about the Pac-12 and saying that the Pac-12 was going to just kind of eat itself alive, and that there wasn't going to be. I think the exact same thing is going to happen in the Big 12 this year. I think it's going to be the most fun conference to watch all year, but they're not going to get one in because there's not going to be one a strong enough of a resume.
All right.
Which all leads me to say, and I can see by the smirk on your face, you see where I'm going here, that I'm going to take number 4 as Penn State.
Okay.
And say that a one-loss Penn State team beats the resume of what could potentially be a 2 or 3 loss Big 12 champ or a 2-loss ACC champ.
Mm-hmm.
So my Final Four are Alabama, Ohio State, Washington, and Penn State.
And that's first. I would love to have 2 Big Ten teams in the Final Four. I might regret saying that when we get down to late December, and have to play rematch or something. However that might work. But yeah, that would be spectacular. And I think Alabama, depending on how their season goes, they could lose 1. Could they lose 2 and still get in if they dominate the rest of the games? I mean that's a possibility, but I think that's an interesting approach. It'd be really cool to have. It would be awesome. It would be awesome to have 2 Big Ten teams in.
Your turn.
I'm going to go a different direction.
Okay.
I am like you. There's no reason not to put Alabama in that first spot at this point of the year. Excuse me. I mean, just they're so ridiculously consistent, and returning a quarterback with Jalen Hurts. That's got to work in their favor. So sure, yes. I'm going to go ahead and say that Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten title, and Ohio State's going to be a member of the Final Four. I think I like Southern Cal, and I think it's just it might even be just a kind of squidge of momentum sort of thing over Washington. Something like Southern Cal returning to its rightful place atop the Pac-17 or whatever it is. Sam Darnold is spectacular. And you mentioned the defense. You can look at inexperience. You can look at the issues they had last year. You can also look at the 6 returning starters coming back this season. So I'm going to take a flyer on Southern Cal. And this was the hard one. And I'm this is a reach, perhaps. But I look at the schedule for Oklahoma State. They do have to travel to Texas, and as you said. Maybe Tom Herman's a couple years away, but still not a game you want to dismiss. But TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma, all travel to Stillwater. I have no idea about Oklahoma State's defense. I'm not sure that it matters. They're going to score, and they're going to score. They're going to score a lot. And I wonder. I wonder about a perception here a little bit too, and the fact that the Big 12 has sort of been left out of these conversations recently. So maybe if you have and you could be completely right about how the Big 12 is going to go, and they could eat their young and nothing's going to happen. But if there's a dominant team,
right?
I think that's going to earn them an extra look, and I think that could be the Cowboys. So. I got Alabama, Ohio State, Southern California, and Oklahoma State as my Final Four.
And that's not completely out of the question. I just think whoever wins the Big 12 has to completely dominate to be able to
They do, absolutely.
Because that could be a great league. And they're going to have a real strong argument for strength of schedule. Whoever, ends up winning that league, if they can win and win convincingly, and with what I think looks like it's going to be the caliber of those teams, they absolutely should be in. I just don't know whether or not that's going to happen, but we'll see what Oklahoma State can do.
We will see. If there's a team that's going to do it this season out of that conference, that's going to be the one.
I would agree.
And then we have actual. I know we do like cupcake weekends once in a while, but we have some killer games coming up this weekend. Excuse me, our team's notwithstanding, but we have 3 legit top 25 matches, and 1 that is not top 25, that is not top 20, not top 10, but depending on your poll, top 2 or top 3. That's a pretty cool thing for the first weekend. Let's start. As much as it pains me, in the Jerry Jones Dome, where number 11 Michigan will play number 17 Florida. Michigan is favored by 3.5 points. What do you think?
Did we check the over/under on this game?
I didn't.
Because I am
and
fairly
I'm gonna take the under.
Yeah, that would be. The first thing I wrote down on my notes for this game is first team to 10 might win this. Because okay, so again, newcomers that don't realize that haven't seen this before, we have mutually loathed Florida's offense
Yeah,
for the last I don't know, 3 years maybe.
Since
at least
Steve Spurrier left, maybe
something like that. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've been entertained by a Florida offense.
Yeah,
and this year it's not off to a good start because there's still unrest at quarterback at Florida. Right. I mean, there's 2 freshmen, and then you've got Malik Zaire who transferred in from Notre Dame, but there's some unrest as to whether or not he should actually be the starter. And so, so there's a little bit of chaos in the Gators' offensive scheme here. Michigan lost a bunch of talent on both sides to both the NFL and graduation. And Wilton's. And quarterback's back, but at the same time, he's been labeled that dreaded game manager, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, he's a good quarterback. He's not an exceptional quarterback. He does well in certain situations, but he's not necessarily somebody that you put the ball in his hands and say, "Go win us the game." And the weapons that he had around him are now all gone. Primarily Jabril Peppers.
Yes.
They're all in the NFL now.
Yes.
So offensively, both these teams don't really have an identity. Defensively, they're both outstanding, which is why I think this game is just going to be an absolute slogfest because both defenses are returning a bunch of starters. They're both really, really excellent. Although you do have to say Michigan lost 10 offensive starters last year. But Florida has a new defensive coordinator in Randy Shannon, familiar to Florida people. And they lost 8 NFL draft. Yeah, right. And they lost 8 NFL draft picks. So it's I don't know. I want to be really, really excited about this game, and it's got 2 really marquee names behind it.
Yes. But ranked teams. Big opening weekend.
Yeah, in Jerry World and big name markets behind them, big schools, but it's going to be like a 10-7 slogfest. And until Florida can show me anything otherwise on offense, I have to lean Michigan in this one because at least they were able to put up points last year.
Yes.
And so I'm going to give Michigan the benefit of the doubt at the moment and say Michigan edges this one out, but he better have other things to do during this game while you're if you're gathering people together, this is when you serve dinner or, all those other things because God, I really want this game to be good, but it could be a long night.
Michigan 7-3. There it is. I think there'll be a little more scoring than that, but I'm going to give Michigan the edge mostly on the notion that Spade is back and he's not spectacular, but he is steady. And the point has been made over and over the summer as I kind of read up on how things are going to go that whatever you think about Jimmy Harbaugh, he does recruit and he's the folks that he has stepping in to replace the gajillion starters that he lost to graduation into the NFL. By the time I'm seeing them at the end of November, we won't be able to describe them as an experience. Right now, we can describe them as an experienced but talented, and I think that's going to be enough. So I'm seeing Michigan in a sleepy game in that first one. We're going to go out of order chronologically, which is not something we typically do, but we have obviously our key game this season. This one actually could be interesting. On Sunday at FedEx Field, number 22 West Virginia versus number 21 Virginia Tech. Tech is favored by 4.5. How's this going to go?
This is probably the toughest game for me to kind of figure out and try to pick who's going to win this game because there's still a lot of unknowns on both sidelines here. Virginia Tech has huge questions on offense. New quarterback coming in, likely going to be redshirt freshman Josh Jackson, not necessarily 100% at this point based on what I've read. Cam Phillips, who is kind of their go-to wide receiver last year, is back, so that's good. So whoever's under center has at least a reliable out to go to. But at the same time, like, who else is going to step up? They don't really have a running back settled yet. They're still kind of trying to figure out the offensive line a bit. And so there's a lot of unrest on offense. Their key is very similar to the opposite of what we were just talking about with USC, how they tend to have issues on defense. Virginia Tech's defense is outstanding, and it's returning most of its linebacking and secondary core. There was some turnover on the line, but apparently based on some different things that happened at the end of last year, a lot of the replacements also saw playing time, very similar to the Penn State situation. So, so there's some experience on defense. Defense is solid. West Virginia is just probably one of the most entertaining teams to watch, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out this year because Dana Holgerson is no longer calling plays. They hired a new offensive coordinator. And they have a quarterback in Florida transfer, Will Grier, who I actually wrote down, who may have been the last offensive spark we saw from Florida. Because Will Grier actually had the Gators at 6-0 before he admitted to taking a banned substance, was suspended from the team, and that left his departure from the team. He sat out a year, and now he's at West Virginia.
Yes.
And you've got to think Holgo with a quarterback. I know he's not calling the plays anymore, but Holgo with a quarterback who can actually throw the ball. This is going to be really fun to watch in Morgantown this year. The problem there is that West Virginia has huge questions on defense. And it's partially because of the turnover there, but they also they run that wacky like 3-3-5 kind of hybrid scheme, which just baffles everybody. So if they get the holes plugged properly, they could really go in and kind of mess up the Big 12 and really kind of make a run for it. And their hybrid safety, Kazir White, who was just kind of all over the place last year, he's back. So that's good. So that's going to kind of help make all that mix. If this game was in Morgantown, 100%, I'd be all over the Mountaineers in this one. It's a neutral field, though, and sometimes West Virginia doesn't do well in those, like, neutral field kind of environments. You think about bowl games and those sorts of things. Like, they just kind of sometimes fall flat when they're not in front of the home audience. So it makes it a little bit – I lean West Virginia, but it's definitely the hardest game to predict. It wouldn't shock me if Virginia Tech won this game, but I'm really intrigued by what West Virginia is going to be able to do this year. So I'm going to lean Mountaineers. Okay.
It is tough. I would typically have a lot of faith in West Virginia's offense, and particularly, a somewhat of a known quality with Greer coming in at quarterback. It's an interesting matchup with Tech's defense. That's the culture of the Hokies is, we defense and special teams. That's what we do. So that's strength on strength kind of matchup makes this especially interesting. And I think, in questions, you mentioned West Virginia's defense. There apparently is going to be inexperienced in the front. If they have the talent in the backfield where they can kind of relieve pressure on, particularly on linebackers. I mean, if they have cornerbacks who can reliably cover one-on-one, and do so in this case against an offense that may has some questions of its own, that could be enough. And I'm gonna go with West Virginia in this one.
Nice.
And that leads us with the marquee. It's actually, I don't think this would be a knockout game for either team at this point of the season, but to have a 1 versus 3 according to the AP poll matchup in week 1 is really interesting and sort of cool. Number 1 Alabama, again neutral field against number 3 Florida State. This is in Atlanta. Alabama's favored by 7. What do you think?
Well, I'll start with Florida State, I think, here, because I think that's where we have the biggest question marks. The best name in college football, DeAndre Francois, is back under center. I got his name in week 1 of the show. Nice. DeAndre Francois. So he's back, but Dalvin Cook is gone, as is Travis Rudolph, who was Francois' top go-to wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And the offensive line is still a bit of a question mark. Especially because, and this is something to keep note of, is that the center, Alec Eberle, is actually returning from off-season hip surgery.
I did not know. Okay.
So you have this whole offensive line still a little bit under the mend a bit, I guess you could say. You got a quarterback who got beat up at the end of last year. I mean, he started the season really, really strong, and then, you know, as the offensive line kind of deteriorated around him a little bit, he started to flounder. I mean, not that Florida State had a bad season by any stretch,
right,
but it just, you know, you'd see a little bit of rumblings as to what's really going on with this offense. Now, Florida State's strength is its defense, and it should have another outstanding defensive line. Derwin James is back at safety after he had that like devastating knee injury at the beginning of the year last year. So it's good to see him back on the field. And he was always a threat. He's one of those guys that you just want to know where he is on the field at all times. But like I said, when we were talking about our Final Four picks, there's something about this Florida State team that maybe I just need to see them play. Maybe I need to see them in this game to see how they're coming together as a team, because I'm not sold that they're a top 5 team. But at the same time, I can't make an argument for who else I would put in their place. Like, that's the weird thing this year. I think this is going to be a really fun year because, like, okay, so we take Florida State out of the top 5. Who do we put in? I don't know. And there's not really a worthy candidate to move in there yet. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this team responds. Alabama is Alabama. Jalen Hurts coming back. It's the first time that they've had a returning.
This is like Alabama plus, actually, with the returning quarterback.
It is. And they've got Damian Harris and both Scarborough back. Okay, so you got both your speed back and your power back. The biggest thing here with the Alabama offense is that their top 3 wide receivers are all gone. So that's going to put a bit of a challenge. But really, when does Alabama ever rely on passing the football anyway? You know, they're a ground and pound, grind them out kind of team, and that's all set up. So that's not really going to change. And leave it to Nick Saban. Talk about plug and play, right? I mean, last year we talked about that with Jalen Hurts coming in. We're like, well, can Jalen Hurts handle the pressure? And it was just plug and play. He just went right in, and now Jalen Hurts is a household name. I think the same thing's going to happen with this defense. They lost 5 starters to the NFL. But when have we ever not known Nick Saban to be able to plug openings on his defense? It's still going to be one of the best defenses in the country. You've got an offense that actually has a year under its belt, not starting from scratch. At the same time, it's hard not to pick Alabama in this game, and it's hard not to pick it by 10 points. I know the line is 7, but it just feels like that's a little low based on the uncertainty that Florida State has on offense right now. I like Alabama, and I would take them to win outright, even with the points. So
I'm going to agree with every single thing you said, and I'm going to add this. There was actually speculation at the end of last season that Nick Saban would retire if he won a national title, and of course, everyone, me first and foremost. Saw what Clemson did in the semifinal, and then goes on and beats Alabama in the championship game.
And one of the best games in college football history.
Oh yeah, it's great, great game. I'm not sure that anybody preps better than Nick Saban does, and I'm not sure that anybody can prep better than Nick Saban does when he is pissed off about something, like losing a national championship that he expected to win. So to reiterate everything you said, plus a motivated, irritated Nick Saban who has been hounding his team since the day after the national championship game last season. Alabama is favored by 7. I think Alabama wins this by a couple touchdowns, perhaps more. And that may not work out to be a disqualifier for Florida State, as you said.
No.
You don't know how that's going to be. And if you're going to lose one now, lose it now, lose it to Alabama, and you've got the rest of the season to recover. But this feels like a kind of statement game for Nick Saban, and I think his team will react that way when they get the chance.
Yeah.
Carla, once again, it's college football season.
It is college football season.
Here we go.
Like Nashville, but we're getting there.
It actually at Pittsburgh it has felt like it for the last couple of days. These aren't changing or anything yet, but there's just that kind of different feel in the air, and I think I think it's definitely got me in the right frame of mind. Guys, listen, thank you for watching and for listening. I'll make sure when we have all the approvals, we'll have the libs and URL so you can find the audio feed when we have iTunes and TuneIn stuff that will be posted on Facebook as well. And we appreciate your patronage for the 6th year in a row. Carla, that's it. Have fun this weekend.
You too. And enjoy the football. That's so weird to say already, but
I am
yeah.
going to enjoy the football.
Season 6, here we go.
Woohoo! Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you again soon.